Right. Hey everyone, it's Kevin Gosztola here. I'm the curator of the Dissenter newsletter. Welcome to the Shadowproof YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button if you aren't a subscriber already. You'll get alerts for future interviews like the one we're doing now with friend and colleague in media and also a CIA whistleblower. Welcome to the show, John Kiriakou.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Let me take this down, get that out of here. And I'm having you on a Friday for the Friday news dump. We've got the search warrant unsealed, but what's dominated this entire week is the fact that the FBI took this step, or I guess we should say the Justice Department took this step of seeking a warrant and then going in and raiding. I'm gonna use that word. I think it's a joke that we've had Justice Department officials being like, no, it wasn't a raid. It was a search. We just went in there and searched. Right. But they raided this, it's like got 55 plus rooms on this estate. They raided his, it's kind of a resort. He raided this estate and they seized, from what we're hearing in reports, like 20 boxes of documents from him after there had already been coordination with the National Archives to recover 15 other boxes of documents, some of them probably classified. Right. And we know the Justice Department then got involved because the archives found classified information in those boxes. So there's a lot to get into here, but let me first start with the question that is on all of our minds, which is looking at this search warrant and wondering, does this mean Donald Trump is going to be indicted and face Espionage Act charges? Now, I'm already on record saying I don't think that that's likely for reasons we are going to get into in this discussion, but you were targeted under the Espionage Act. People may not know your full backstory. You weren't raided, though, were you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you were raided. Okay. So you had the FBI run roughshod through your home. So maybe
Twice,
you want to,
as a matter of fact.
All right. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about your own personal experience in comparison to what happened to Trump this past week.
Sure. The first time the FBI raided my house was in 2012. I had blown the whistle on the CIA's torture program, and the FBI had been investigating me for 4 years and decided to come into the house and seize all of my electronics. So I actually wasn't home at the time, but my ex-wife was, and 12 FBI agents came in. They were very quick about it. They pound on the door, and if you don't open it, they'll break it down. They came in, they handed her the search warrant. They took my desktop, my laptop, my mom's laptop that I had had since she died. They took all the business cards that I had. I had hundreds of business cards. From meeting different people. They took some thumb drives, anything that was electronic, where digital media could be stored. They took it. The second time that I was raided was in 2019. I was involved in a child custody battle with my ex-wife, and in order to gain the upper hand, she called the cops and said that I was hoarding weapons and I was planning something big. Those were her words. 22 FBI agents raided my house that time, and it was different. They took a sledgehammer and smashed a hole in the wall of my kitchen. They dumped all my potted plants out on the floor, claiming that they were looking for weapons in the potting soil. They just completely trashed the house. It took me days to get the house back in order. They just ransacked the place and then never charged me with a crime, I might add. So yeah, they can be real SOBs about this kind of thing. Now, one of the things that I thought was funny in this Trump raid was they clearly have an informant, right? This is clearly somebody on the inside who told them where the documents were, who told them that there were documents there in the first place. But then they made a point of going through Melania's clothes, through her closet. Why? Well, they did that for the same reason that they, raided Roger Stone at 6 a.m. with CNN in tow, just to humiliate, right? It's a power move, and they do it just to humiliate. I've got to add another thing too, Kev. The last couple of days, I've followed every detail of this situation so far, and I have very much wanted to criticize the FBI for a whole bunch of things, overreach and being assholes and just, doing what they do. But as more and more information has been released, especially today, I'm kind of hard pressed to see where the FBI made mistakes. And so far, it's been very easy to be able to list the mistakes Donald Trump seems to have made.
I think you're right. And so let's, there's a lot to dig into, but first for the fact that now we're all treated to the mainstream press or the mass media's explanations of what the Espionage Act is, and whether you like what it takes to be charged under the Espionage Act. Let's just get this out here in the open. So this is Eli Honig, and I'm going to just pull up his bio. I believe he was at the Justice Department at one point, because most of these people who land at CNN have come, there's like a revolving door.
Oh, yes, very much so.
I'm just double checking. So he's senior legal analyst at CNN, and he was at the Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York from 2004 to 2012. And then he was in the New Jersey division as the Assistant Attorney General from 2012 to 2018. So he's a prosecutor. He's a DOJ type. So here it goes.
We've got Section 793, 1519, 2071. Give us some more.
Okay, it's a law school exam.
Yes.
In 3 words: espionage, obstruction, and destruction. So starting with the first one, 793, that is part of the Espionage Act here, and that applies to anybody who gathers or loses or destroys defense information, but this is the really important part, with the intent or reason to believe or reckless of the likelihood that that information could be used to injure the national interests of the United States. That's the first one. The second one is obstruction. Essentially, it's obstruction of justice, destroying, moving, concealing a document in order to interfere with some sort of ongoing investigation. And the third one is destruction of a federal document. A couple of really important things to keep in mind, though. These are the charges that prosecutors wrote out and said, we have probable cause, here's our probable cause, we don't have this document, brought it to a judge who agreed. It is a lower standard of proof, it's probable cause, it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Also, nobody is bound by this. If the proof ultimately is not there on any of these charges, prosecutors don't have to and won't charge it. If prosecutors find evidence sufficient to charge other crimes, they can do that too. So this is a starting point, this is for the search warrant only, but it still tells us quite a bit about what the proof is and where DOJ is interested in looking.
Yeah.
All right, your reaction?
Wow. Espionage means a lot of different things to a lot of different prosecutors. I don't mean to give a history lesson, but for people who don't know the history of the Espionage Act was written it was passed into law in 1917 to combat German saboteurs during the First World War. It is so old that it doesn't even mention the words classified information, because the classification system wasn't even invented until the 1950s. It mentions only national defense information, but it doesn't explain what national defense information is. It's up to individual judges, individual prosecutors, individual juries even, to decide what national defense information is. And it doesn't explain what harm to the national security means, right? I mean, we've got senior level NSA people, FBI people, who now have come out after the fact saying, well, Chelsea Manning didn't really harm the national security. There's no evidence that there was any harm to the national security. There was some embarrassment, but that's not harm to the national security. Same thing with Ed Snowden. Ed Snowden didn't reveal anything that harmed national security. In fact, he provided a public service by telling us that the government was breaking the law by spying on American citizens. It was under the Espionage Act that Julius Ethel Rosenberg executed in, I think it was 1950. And again, except for a couple of very minor technical changes, the Espionage Act has never been updated. The Espionage Act also does not allow for an affirmative defense, right? You are not permitted under the law to stand up in court and explain why you did what you did. That by blowing the whistle, for example, on the fact that NSA was spying on Americans was in the national interest. You are not allowed to use that as a defense. And so there are some very serious problems with the Espionage Act. Another problem is that the Justice Department uses it as a cudgel to just bash the brains out of whistleblowers or would-be whistleblowers. And to me, it cheapens the law. I don't think we should have an Espionage Act anyway. Or if we did have an Espionage Act, it should be rewritten from scratch because the one that we have is so full of problems. But now, I mean, if what we're learning on CNN and MSNBC is true, Donald Trump can be charged under the Espionage Act and not under like the entry-level Espionage Act either. The next one up, instead of 5 years per charge, they're talking about 793, which is 10 years per charge. Yeah. We know that he famously, tore every document that came into his possession, tore it in half and then tore it in half again. And people had to tape it all back together again before sending it to the National Archives. That's a crime. That's a felony. You can't destroy documents. We have laws that govern the preservation of these documents. And I get it that he's not a professional politician and it's his personality. But listen, how many times do you have to be told?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, how many times are people at lower levels told in their training? And then maybe they could claim, oh, but I don't really take this stuff seriously. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And does that help them? No, they end up in prison for a few years.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So with my newsletter, I went through and I'll just say I put myself out there and said, based on what we know about the way the Espionage Act is used. And even after all of this, I have to confess, I don't yet believe that the Justice Department is going to charge him with violating the Espionage Act.
I agree.
And I don't because it's actually probably a different reason than what I'm going to discuss. But my first initial argument stems from the disparate treatment, that two-tiered justice system, that fact that like what you endured, but also like, I didn't even reference the cases that are like Daniel Hale or Thomas Drake, who were prosecuted for retaining classified information. But I referenced people who actually have taken documents home and kept them on their property or had documents found in their cars or whatever, and they were NSA contractors, and they were actually prosecuted because, hey, you're not allowed to just have this in your house. But and let's be clear, we don't actually know what their plans were for this classified information. They never turned around and gave it to the media and said, okay, I'm going to be a source. They just were found with classified information. A good example, too, that is still very bizarre, or I guess just quirky, maybe not bizarre, but quirky, is about James Hitzelberger.
Yeah, I've spoken to him a number of times.
Yeah, and it's sort of kind of like, is it kind of like a Mr. Magoo kind of thing where like, he's just like bumbling along and I violated the Espionage Act because I'm a bookish person and cares about documents.
I think he may have had a hoarding disorder and it's like he couldn't help himself but to just take all this stuff home and store it in a shed or something.
Well, he gave it to the Hoover Institution.
Yeah,
at
he ended up
Stanford
sending
University.
Yeah, that's right.
And they
Yeah.
have documents there, along with his pre-revolutionary Iran collection of documents that he had collected. It's fascinating. And it's fascinating, too, because the Justice Department recognizes, so does the judge, that he's not really committing espionage. So
No.
they're going to handle him delicately. He just got time served. I mean, he ended up maybe doing, like a year of time in
I
prison.
think that's what it was. Yeah.
And that was it. And it's very different from a lot of the other cases. But still, again, he now has Espionage Act on his record, as he was convicted of it. And so David Petraeus, though, he got to bring in his legal team and make sure he didn't get charged with violating the Espionage Act.
Yeah, they did not charge him with espionage, or they didn't convict him of espionage. Instead, he took a plea to a misdemeanor, misuse of classified information, or failure to secure classified information, something like that. It was a misdemeanor. He paid a fine and got 18 months of unsupervised probation, which, is literally nothing.
And his lawyers got a reference to your case removed from the statement of facts because he lectured you about secrecy oaths.
He sure did.
Yeah. And then it turned out.
And you know what's funny? On the day of my sentencing, he sent an all hands email to every CIA employee in the world saying that today was a great day for the intelligence community, that John Kiriakou was sentenced to prison, and that we have to remember our oaths mean something. And then 2 hours later, he lied to the FBI in his office and said that he had never provided classified information to his adulterous girlfriend who was not entitled to receive or possess it.
That's correct. Yeah. Paula Broadwell was working on this biography. And the thing that, again, I guess puts it on this level of Donald Trump is that he had these notebooks that were called black books.
Yes.
Because they had war strategy information. There were diplomatic discussions that were referenced in there. His own conversations about, I think, ISIS with President Barack Obama were noted in those books. And there's, sources and methods information inside of the books. And I'm going to take these to my office. And then when I meet with Paula Broadwell, who I'm having an affair with, I'm going to let her have a peek in the books for her book, her book that I'm having, that I now am effectively making sure lionizes me and is not like some deep dive balanced biography, but is going to be the thing that deifies me forever, hopefully.
That's exactly what happened. And Leon Panetta did the same thing when he became the CIA director. He authorized briefings for the director and writer of Zero Dark 30, classified briefings at the CIA using a classified mock-up of the bin Laden compound. In exchange, the analysts who provided those illegal classified briefings received gifts like watches and invitations to the movie's premiere in Hollywood. And then after all that, as he was patting himself on the back for the bin Laden killing, he revealed the name of the Navy SEAL that killed bin Laden. The name had been classified until he blabbed it out. And then just said, "Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. It was an accident, so it's not espionage. I didn't do it on purpose." Well, the Espionage Act doesn't say anything about whether it's an accident, the revelation's an accident or not.
Yeah.
In my own case, in the very first hearing that we had, my attorneys asked that the charges be dismissed because I had no criminal intent. What I had done, first of all, they ended up dropping all the espionage charges because I hadn't committed espionage. Where they got me was on the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, because I confirmed the name of a former colleague to a reporter who never made the name public. And so my attorneys asked that the case be dropped because I had no criminal intent and I hadn't done it on purpose. And in the Tom Drake case, his judge said that the person charged had to show criminal intent. And my judge said that she had chosen to not respect the precedent that was set in the Drake case. And I still remember my lead attorney, standing up and saying, "Your Honor, are you saying that somebody can accidentally commit espionage?" And she said, "That's exactly what I'm saying." And she looked at me and she said, "Mr. Kiriakou, you either did it or you didn't do it. And I think you did it." So there you have it.
And that's what's just maddening to listen to someone like Eli Honig talk about intent in the Espionage Act, because it doesn't have anything to do with your actions.
No.
It's all about whether the information was classified or not classified. Mm-hmm. And if you release it and it's classified, then they say you had an intent to injure the United States and you were trying to advantage a foreign power, mm-hmm. and you're going to prison, or you're going to have this on your criminal record at the very least, and we'll give you probation for 3 to 5 years or something like that. And so in any case, let's spend just a few minutes. We got a good amount of viewers, so thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, actually, this is one of the better streams that I've been able to do. So while I have you here, I just like take 10 or 15 more minutes of your time if you don't mind. I mean, it is a Friday night. I should be relaxing, watching some popcorn flick and not bothering with the
As you
downfall.
can see, I didn't even bother to shave.
Yeah, well,
it's Friday. There's nothing going on in the news.
It's not like I got a collared shirt. I mean, and we didn't. Oh, by the way, we didn't decide to match in like black T-shirts. We're not sending some kind of like message to people here. But yeah. Other than the fact that I do think the universe might be caving in on itself if Assange and Trump are going to be charged with violating the Espionage Act. I don't know. I feel like I'm entering like a circle of hell or something. I do honestly have to express my anxiety about that. But so I'm looking at this and it says essentially, okay, so I do want to make this point, which I think you'll be able to accent, which is, it says that they're going in to search his estate, and they mention the Espionage Act. But that doesn't necessarily mean, I agree with what Eli was saying, it doesn't necessarily mean the Justice Department's going to bring an Espionage Act prosecution against Donald Trump. That's just the justification they have, that they can go into his estate and violate his property and take it while he's not there and reclaim control of the U.S. government documents. Right?
Yes, you're exactly right. It allows them to better hone what it is they think they know, or what it is that they think they want to know before they file charges. And they can do that in a couple different ways too. They can file direct charges, or they can turn everything over to a grand jury when they're finally ready to charge them with something, if they get to that point. It doesn't have to be, either or not. I mean, it doesn't have to be both. They can do it either way. But, we're going to rapidly get to a point where these are all going to be political decisions that are going to be made. I mean, you charge a former president of the United States with espionage when you know what the real goal is to charge him with something so it bars him from running for president again. I think that's really what the goal is.
Well, I could theorize, and I wonder what you think of this. I could theorize that the conversation with Trump's legal representatives goes something like this. Mr. Trump, we're not going to charge you with violating the Espionage Act. We could, but we're just going to ask you, don't run for president again.
Exactly.
And we will not press criminal charges. But if you do run for president, we believe you're going to get in the White House and commit further offenses that involve mutilating, destroying, tampering, jeopardizing these national security documents. And we can't take that risk. We're too anxious here in the national security state. I mean, obviously, I recognize that there's a culture in some of these institutions. They know they don't like Trump. He's got that. So there is a hostility. But still, look, they've now documented that this is going on, and they don't want it to happen again.
Mhm. I could totally see that being the way this plays itself out. Or, if Trump won't back down, I could see them charging him with something that would prevent him from running, and then Biden issuing a pardon. But then, even that would put Biden in a predicament, because why is it okay for Donald Trump to violate the Espionage Act, but then you're coming down like a ton of bricks on Julian Assange? And you've got Ed Snowden, who did far, far less than what you're accusing Donald Trump of doing. He didn't release code word special access, sources and methods information. And the poor guy's in exile in Russia.
Yeah.
So there's some serious political questions here.
I mean, look, I have tremendous sympathy for, I said this to you on your radio show, and I have tremendous sympathy for all the families of people, and including your family, but also like everyone who has been through a prosecution under the Espionage Act. I'm thinking of Reality Winner and her family. I'm thinking of Daniel Hale and his friends and family. I'm thinking of Thomas Drake. I've been watching him, and he told me personally he's going through flashbacks, struggling as he sees what's been unfolding this past week. I'm thinking obviously of Snowden. He can't come back here. Chelsea did get a commutation, but Chelsea Manning still has that on her record that she can't go to Canada.
Neither can I.
You're not
banned from Canada,
because that's the way that they interpret that our law. It's so insane. And then there's other people. Jeffrey Sterling is a good example of went through what I think is a bogus trial where there was never really even evidence put forward.
Literally no evidence.
And he's got this against him. So I feel for them. At the same time, I'm with you. Abolish the Espionage Act. And the thing that's crazy that I'm glad people are getting introduced to in the last week. I hope people try and remember some of these statutes that are named. You now know that there are multiple choices the Justice Department has when charging someone for mishandling classified documents. It doesn't have to be the Espionage Act.
That's right. When I was still at the CIA, it was early in my career. I sat next to a woman who was having an affair with a man who used to be a senior CIA officer and had gone on to be a commentator on CNN. And, in the course of pillow talk, she said something to him about terrorism. I don't remember what it was. And he repeated it on the air. So the CIA filed a crimes report. There was a DOJ investigation, and they found, he's having an affair with this woman. So today she would be charged with espionage, and she would be facing 10 years in prison. What they did then, and this was 1997, was they put a letter in her personnel file, and they suspended her without pay for 4 weeks. And she was not allowed to be promoted for 2 one-year cycles. So how did we get from that to spending the rest of your life in a maximum security penitentiary in one generation? I don't understand. But that's where we are.
Yeah. And I'll say to you that we don't have the narrative yet, but that raises 2 questions. So first, and you can respond to each of these. They're connected. We don't have the affidavit.
Right.
And the Justice Department is saying that we may not get it, but the affidavit is what the FBI's special agent usually writes out, why they're going to go conduct or execute this warrant, and lays out some kind of facts for pursuing their actions. And it's what's necessary, I believe, to get the judge to agree to it. Am I correct or wrong? Or it's sort of like part of the basis?
Yeah. What they did is they went to the judge and said that they have no problem releasing the warrant itself, but the supporting affidavit apparently has so much either classified information in it or information that could reveal classified information that we likely won't see what the affidavit says. It's funny too. Kevin, I think you would remember during the Jeffrey Sterling trial, the lengths that the Justice Department went to protect information that really wasn't classified. I remember even in the Tom Drake hearings, they invoked SIPA, the Classified Information Procedures Act.
Yeah.
Yep. And they couldn't say certain words. Like they would replace a word that they considered to be classified with a word like swimming pool. Right. And I remember a guy, this became a joke actually among my friends. I remember a guy saying very seriously, the word zarf when standing alone is unclassified. It's like, come on, we're seriously fighting about this in court? That whether the word zarf is classified or not? But they go overboard. And what they end up doing is convincing the jury that, wow, if the Justice Department is so concerned about this information getting out, that even we, the jury, that have been given temporary security clearances just to hear this case, we still can't hear some of the evidence because it's so sensitive, then he must be guilty.
Yeah.
So
what I was going to say was we won't read that, although the Knight First Amendment Center is going to try to, and I think all the media organizations should try to get it unsealed. But the other issue may be that a judge would say it's prejudicial, that they should be able to keep that from being released just in case there's going to be charges brought against Trump. That be that as it may. Someone I don't normally like to give credit did note that back in 2019, there were whistleblowers that came forward who were complaining about the threat of Donald Trump's administration potentially sharing nuclear technology with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you're up on this.
Yes.
And there's been some connecting of the dots, theorizing, which I'm openly willing to engage in because it seems plausible, that maybe, there is something very geopolitical here to why the Justice Department would want to recover these documents, given the Trump family's business deals with people in Saudi Arabia. And this report from 2019, Elijah Cummings, who's no longer alive, but was the chair and had some role in putting this together. And, he's actually one of the few that did care about these whistleblower issues to some small degree.
That's right.
But it mentions that Mohammed bin Salman wants to get his hands on nuclear technology to have a way to counter Iran. And if Iran would ever develop a nuclear weapon, and of course we don't have a nuclear deal anymore, so we don't really know what the Iranian regime would choose to do in the future.
And there's some background to this. The Saudis have been seeking nuclear technology since the 1980s. And they even went so far as to purchase information from the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis and the Saudis have had a very close, historically close relationship, to the point where the Saudis have provided so much money to the Pakistanis over the years that in gratitude, the Pakistanis named one of their largest cities after King Faisal, Faisalabad. So what the rumor was that they had purchased this information that the Pakistanis had gotten from the North Koreans through A.Q. Khan, the father of the Pakistani nuclear program, and that it was passed to Saudi Arabia. In the last couple of years, the Saudis have come to a preliminary agreement with the government of Turkey for the Turks to build a nuclear power plant. And they claim that this is for peaceful purposes because, of course, there's not enough energy in Saudi Arabia. They have to have nuclear power. to power their country. So what we're hearing in the media over the last couple of days is plausible. I'm unaware of any truth.
No. There's no basis to what I'm saying. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out why Donald Trump would have an interest in nuclear weapons documents. That's all. And I'm asking the question.
People are talking about it.
Others are wondering, and I have to just put my foot down too and say, I'm no person who wants another repeat of what happened with the Russiagate scandals. Sure. And I know that the media made claims about stuff and the FBI and the Justice Department that were later proven to not be true. But I just, having been doing this work for the last decade plus, I really do believe what is coming out from sources about this investigation. And I mostly believe it because we are seeing them use very delicate care in how they pursue the investigation, and like giving Donald Trump so much time to return the documents. Like there's a subpoena, there's a National Archives, there's a Justice Department team with a counterintelligence chief who goes there in June. And then it's not until August that his estate is raided. I don't know. Look, I understand the Justice Department is politicized and it's used as a tool by both parties in any administration. That's the way it is now. But I just have a tough time believing that they're not trying to assert some control and care because they don't trust Donald Trump to protect and handle these documents responsibly.
Another thing that I would be interested in knowing is every former president is allowed to keep a lifetime secret security clearance, not top secret, but all former presidents are allowed access to secret documents, and they are permitted secret level briefings anytime they want one by CIA analysts. Many, many times over the course of my career, I was called upon to brief Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush. Maybe they have an interest in, Iraq, let's say, or Afghanistan or something. And you fly down there for the day and you give them their little briefing and you take a picture together and then you leave. I'd be very interested to know if Donald Trump has a secret security clearance. Very interested. In my whole career, only one time did I ever hear of anybody having their clearance revoked. And it was Admiral Stansfield Turner, who had been the CIA director. He came back to headquarters for a briefing, and I was instructed to brief him at the unclassified level. He was going to give a speech on a cruise ship and just wanted some background about pro-democracy movements in the Persian Gulf. And I asked why the unclassified level. Is it because he's going to pass the information on to these cruise ship passengers? And they said, no, because we hate him. That's why. And I wonder if they've given Trump the same access that they give all other former presidents.
Okay, so it's mostly useless to go through the sets of documents that were taken and talk to people about the classified information because it's just, there's apparently like one set of top secret documents. We know that he had like clemency information on Roger Stone. There's apparently something on the president of France. I have no idea why Donald Trump's got something on Emmanuel Macron, but that's a file that was taken. Those are the only two we really specifically know details, and then they're all labeled vaguely as like miscellaneous. They're just labeled by the classified. So the top secret set obviously covers anything nuclear weapons related, and that could be what that is. But I guess before you go, and we really have a lot of viewers, so thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to say, while you're here, hit the subscribe button. If you've got any quick questions for John before he runs off this evening, go ahead, drop them here in the chat. Try to be kind to each other. I saw a couple of you bickering, and it was disruptive to the chat. So yeah, I put you on pause just so you could come back to this conversation and not be ridiculous. But so I want to read you this part of the New York Times reporting on what went on, because you were speaking earlier about the potential for an informant at Mar-a-Lago. And I just, this is some decent reporting on what was happening. So this person's been mentioned. His name's Jay Bratt. He's the counterintelligence chief for the Justice Department. They subpoena the Trump organization for a copy of Mar-a-Lago surveillance tapes, a person with the knowledge of the matter said. Then the company complied. They turned over the tapes to the government. I don't know why the Trump organization is complying, but they did. And Mr. Trump's lawyers sift through his records at Mar-a-Lago to determine whether he still was holding on to anything classified or sensitive. In the course of the process, Trump's team made statements to the Justice Department about Mr. Trump, about what he had returned. Then later, officials came to question whether the information was entirely accurate. And then it goes on to say that, okay, so anyways, but I thought that was an interesting detail. There's more detail. I don't think this is the exact report that I read earlier, but there was quite a lot of detail in one of these New York Times reports about how they were going through footage at Mar-a-Lago and they were watching individuals come and go at his estate and tracking movements. Jeez. And so like when I hear that information, I think there's other people who are suggesting that, maybe they saw someone or they saw something happening and then they're like, okay, well, now's the time. We really do have to move. Because it's kind of like, why August?
Yeah.
Okay? Like you've been delicately moving all this time and you seem to be getting responses from Trump's representatives. But like, at what point did you call BS and say, we got to move?
Wow, man, that's a good question, and that very well could be the case, that they just decided there was a danger in waiting any longer, and so they decided they had to move. I thought it was interesting too that the New York Times reported yesterday that both Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump had been begging Donald Trump not to run for president again because they want their wonderful lives back. That was the word that the New York Times used. Was that an accident that it came out yesterday? There's so much more to the story that we just don't know yet.
And we're going to learn. I think I do believe we'll know. Let me get some questions for you, and then
sure.
I'll let you go. So, do you think the Espionage Act will ever be reformed by Congress?
Oh, that's a good question. And you know what? On Monday, I would have said no, never in my lifetime anyway. And now today, I'm wondering if Republicans are going to be so up in arms about this that they'll want to finally reform it. Like I say, it was just barely reformed, not even reformed. It was barely changed in the early 1950s. And then again in 1996 during the Clinton administration. But these were just small technical changes to try to update it. It needs to be scrapped. And if we have to have one, rewritten from scratch. But I think that this might be the kick in the butt that people need on Capitol Hill, where, let's assume the Republicans take the House in November and the Democrats keep the Senate, which is the way things look right now. What better way to work together on a major national security issue than this?
Yeah. We know that there's going to be extensive hearings about the politics in the FBI. We've already been hearing from Chuck Grassley. Ron Johnson's all over the FBI. He won't stop talking. There's, it's Hunter Biden. If it's not Biden, it's not going to be how they handled the raid on Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. So they're ready to dig into the. I mean, I've been hearing things from Chuck Grassley about the FBI that makes it sound like they're going to have church committee hearings again.
I heard that today. Church committee style hearings about the FBI. You know what? That I welcome.
No, we need those. We need more oversight. We need more. And the idea that Christopher Wray can come out, I think he's a former Bush administration official, right? Before he was an FBI director. Right. The idea that he can come out and they get to act like the FBI always does things by the book,
Right.
And I keep wincing every time I hear people go, oh, the FBI only goes in when they have probable cause to execute a search warrant. No, that's not how that
No.
works. All right. So last question for you. You want to say anything about where we're at with Julian Assange? It's always good to keep him in our thoughts.
Julian.
And this person now is thinking of this new news. How is it legal to prosecute him, and what can be done to protect him?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, do we think of these charges in any new light, given that Trump is now in jeopardy?
Well, my position really is identical to yours. And it's that not only should Julian not have been charged, but that that it's criminal to charge him under the Espionage Act for a whole bunch of reasons. He's a publisher. He's a journalist. He's not an American citizen. A whole bunch of different reasons. But, it just shows you how political and politicized the Espionage Act is, where if you want to use it to attack people who publish inconvenient truths, or you want to use it to attack whistleblowers who reveal information that you don't want to be revealed, then that's fine. And then you leak your side of the story to CNN and Fox and MSNBC, and the whistleblower goes to prison. But then, you get a situation like this where there are very serious political questions at hand, and maybe the powers on Capitol Hill aren't going to like that very much. Getting back to Julian real quickly, his family has accused me of being overly optimistic, and I've been overly optimistic several times. The case is before the European Court of Human Rights, but the Boris Johnson administration has already said that they won't delay extradition pending a decision by the European Court of Human Rights. It's a bureaucratic process, and so he hasn't been extradited yet. But if I had to bet money, I'd say he is extradited. And then it's up to us to show our support once he gets here to Washington.
Yeah, it's actually in the UK High Court of Justice.
And it's still in the High Court. Yeah, the European Court of Human Rights is in Strasbourg, I think. They're hearing it simultaneously.
Okay. And then, of course, we've got the criminal case that his people filed in Spain against that private security company.
And how in the world any of that information is even vaguely admissible in a court of law is a mystery to me.
Yeah.
Just like the fact that the CIA had drawn up plans to murder him or to kidnap him in this brazen, shootout that was going to take place in the center of London. How does that not just wreck their whole case? How does it not wreck their case that their star witness has finally confessed to having made everything up and is a convicted pedophile and convicted fraudster? You want to put that guy on the stand? That's your star witness? A pedophile.
Oh, this is a good laugh to end on. You want to respond quickly to Mike Pompeo meeting with Priti Patel, and she asked Pompeo if she could get a personal thank you for approving the extradition.
She was very briefly a candidate for leadership of the Conservative Party. She dropped out a week or 10 days ago. But she really believed that a personal thanks from Mike Pompeo was going to make her prime minister of the UK. I'm glad she failed in round one, although none of them are any good.
I don't think that a Pompeo endorsement does that for your career, but that's just my own opinion. So, all right. Thank you so much for joining me on a Friday evening. We got this news dump. People can find you at Rumble. You do your political misfits radio show during the week.
Yep, Political Misfits on Rumble, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter, all the usual places.
Oh, and you're doing your writing that appears at SheerPost. It's great.
Oh, yeah. SheerPost, Consortium News, and Covert Action Magazine.
And then I'll just say to everyone as I go, stay tuned next week on Monday. We got some big Assange-related WikiLeaks news I can't really talk about right now, but it's been building up to this moment, and it's going to make you feel good. If you've been waiting anxiously for some people around Assange to fight back, that's what we're talking about. So I'll see you all soon. Thank you, and you guys all take care of yourselves.